Welcome to the new Dharma Talk. My name is Matthew Sokolov, a teacher here with One Mind Dharma. And I want to welcome you, and if you've been a past listener of Dharma Talk and the kind of first iteration, welcome you to the new iteration, which is going to be a video series. Some weeks we'll have just me, some weeks we'll have just Elizabeth, some weeks will be the both of us. And our intention is just to offer some perspective on Dharma and on mindfulness and on bringing these ancient practices to everyday life. Just a little note on why we switched over. The old way we were doing it with a podcast was costing us quite a bit of money, and there were no donations coming in. As much as we love what we're doing, we don't make enough money to be able to take those costs ourselves, so we switched it over here to YouTube, which is free and helps us kind of do it with a little bit more love and less worrying about the financial piece. So with that, I just want to offer that you can head to omdharma.com/talk to subscribe via email and to see past episodes. You can also find more information there about donating and supporting the podcast if you want. And if you have any questions or a topic that you want us to cover, you can always send us an email. My email is matthew@oneminddharma.com. Elizabeth's is elizabeth@oneminddharma.com. And if you can't remember those, info@oneminddharma.com comes to both of us. So I want to talk this first week about a topic that's been really hitting home for me, and that's the stories that we tell ourselves and these kind of fixed views we get into. I wrote a post about this recently, and I'll actually leave it in the description down below if you want to take a look at it, although it might be rather redundant after listening to this. But we all tell ourselves these stories about ourselves. And for today, I'm going to focus mostly on the stories we tell about ourselves, but I do think that we can take this insight and bring it to the stories we tell about other people or other situations in our lives as well. And maybe we'll cover that at a later date. So I just want to start with a little story and a little example of the stories that I tell about myself. And I've written about this and talked about it quite a bit in the past. I have a absolutely lovely family. We all get along relatively well. There's, family issues or fighting like any family has. But within the whole extended family, everyone gets along relatively well. And I'm very grateful for that. However, when I spend time around the whole family together, I find myself getting really anxious and sometimes worked up. And this is especially kind of salient during the holidays when it feels forced that I have to be there. So I know this about myself, that I find myself getting anxious around Thanksgiving specifically. The whole family together under one roof and 25 of us, and nothing inherently bad is happening or even unpleasant on the outside. I don't have a family that's making snarky comments at me or putting me down or anything, but it's just this discomfort. So this last year, about a year ago now, I was in the shower getting ready to head over to my parents where Thanksgiving is held. And I had this thought in my head very clear, oh, here we go again. Here comes the kind of chaos and unpleasantness. And I noticed it and I paused and just said, maybe it doesn't have to be that way this year. Maybe where I was, 10 years ago when this feeling kind of started, maybe I'm not exactly the same or don't have the same experience today. And I went to Thanksgiving and really tried to keep an open mind and not kind of feed that story. And there were still moments I felt anxious, or there were unpleasant moments where I felt overwhelmed. But overall, I was able to have a much more pleasant experience than I had ever had in the past. And I attribute this quite a bit just to recognizing this story I was telling myself every year that just comes up, and I just buy into it and I'm off to the races with it. So we can see in this one example how the story kind of is, in a sense, preparing us for what's to come or what's happening. And I don't want to just name that as a bad thing, because sometimes the stories can protect us, and that's often why we hold on to them, especially if we've experienced some trauma or something really harmful, or we're in great fear over something. This story of, oh, I'm going to be anxious and overwhelmed in this situation can kind of help us brace for impact, or maybe put up a little wall and protect ourselves. So I don't want to advocate completely against keeping ourselves safe or putting up a wall when we need to and setting boundaries. I apologize, there are very loud birds going by. But I do want to advocate for investigating if these stories are useful or not. Is this story of I get anxious when I'm around my whole family serving me, or is it causing me suffering? And I don't think it's a black and white answer either often. My personal experience with this story is, in one way, it serves me. I know that I tend to grow more anxious when I'm with the whole family like that. And this serves me because I can bring extra mindfulness to it. I can really tune into it when it arises. I can really be on the lookout for it. The other example I use in the post I recently wrote is I've had a lot of people in our groups over the years say they get really angry in traffic. They're not an angry person, but when they get to driving and people are cutting them off, they get angry. Well, we can recognize these things about ourselves and use it as kind of a prompt to be extra mindful of that anger in that moment, or that anxiety in that moment. Not in a judgmental way, but just to, it gives us somewhere to look, almost like a map. The other kind of flip side of it is when I tell myself that story that I'm going to be anxious or overwhelmed or angry or sad before actually facing a situation, I'm not leaving myself open to experience it, and I'm kind of orienting myself toward anxiety or overwhelm or anger from the beginning. I think that one of the greatest things that mindfulness practice has done for me in my life has allowed me to experience moments as they arise. When something comes up, we can deal with it when it comes up. When something passes on and it's not with us, we don't need to worry about it too much in that moment. And this is ever applicable here, in that we don't need to tell ourselves we're going to be anxious and necessarily prepare for the anxiety like we think we do. Instead, maybe we can recognize that we're prone to anxiety or anger in this moment, or this general experience, and set an intention to really try to experience it as is, to really deal with things as they arise, and not kind of not narrow ourselves into a certain way of behaving. I want to talk about a bigger story that both Elizabeth and I held, and I'll speak for myself because she's not here. For the last few years that Elizabeth and I have been together, maybe 5 years, we've both been really busy. Elizabeth was an undergrad student and then a graduate student. While she was an undergrad, she was working part-time. While she was a grad student, she was working full-time. She was doing her hours and teaching meditation at a treatment center and running the One Mind Dharma Center. I've always taught meditation online and all the stuff with One Mind Dharma that I handle. I also own another small business, and we were just really busy and grinding. And I don't want to pretend that the only reason we grinded was because of the money. There's some tendency to, towards workaholism or losing ourselves in our work, just to name that. But in general, we lived in Los Angeles, and then we moved up to the San Francisco Bay Area, which is one of the most expensive areas in the United States. And that was what we needed to do to live there where we wanted to live and where we loved. And we had such a great time there and loved it. but we were working ourselves kind of too hard, working 60 plus hours a week, barely covering bills and some debts we have and schooling and all of these things. And during that time, we cut off a lot of services from One Mind Dharma that were costing us money. A lot of our podcasts that had, a few thousand listeners weren't really generating any income or supporting themselves and were costing us, $500 a month. So we just stopped. And we started kind of looking at what we could afford to do both energetically and financially. We were caught in this story that we were going to get ahead one day, that this process of starting a family or buying a home or having a home instead of an apartment, these things that we wanted, that we were going to get there was going to be some breakthrough and we could do it here. And we eventually came to the decision that we're not as stuck here in this life, in this kind of dream of a white picket fence as we think we are necessarily. That was maybe back in May or June. And we traveled a little bit to see different places where we may want to live. And we had lots of talks between each other and with kind of our own mentors. And we decided to move out of the United States into Mexico. And a lot of people told us this was a really crazy idea to live abroad and to live somewhere where the culture is a little bit different and to, you're sacrificing some things. Or we were met with a lot of forms of what I would call mild racism. I think the first question almost everybody asked us was, is it safe where you live? And I think that people cared for us. I don't think it was overtly out of fear, but there was some sense of, our families and loved ones weren't crazy about the idea. But we decided to move to Mexico to the town of Playa del Carmen, where we could live for so much less money and be able to live life a little bit more and not work 60 hours a week, but each cut down to about 20 hours a week. And we still are able to save more money than we were saving, and we're able to go out and do things and adventure and explore. So obviously that's a huge change to move to a new country. And that's actually where I am right now, coming to you from, is our home in Playa del Carmen, Mexico. But it's an important story to tell, I think, because it shows that we're not as stuck as we think we are. And Elizabeth and I are both really blessed to be able to pick up and move like that. She's a therapist who sees people online via video chat. I run One Mind Dharma and do online marketing, so I can do my work from anywhere, and as can she. But we were stuck in this story that was causing so much suffering that we had to do this, that this was the life, that this kind of rat race was what you're supposed to do. And I'm not bashing anyone that does want to do that or finds joy in that. I know many people who do, including my own family, who are very happy in general. But for us, that wasn't the right path. We were kind of being sucked into a box, and we were only sucking ourselves in, really. So we made this choice to kind of let go of that box and step outside it and see if there was maybe something else we could do. The freedom that can come from this, from not buying into this story that society tells us about ourselves, that we should be doing this or should be doing that, can be beautiful. And I'm not saying we should, disregard societal norms, but I am saying that it's worth questioning these stories. Are we really stuck in this life, or this job, or this relationship, or this pattern of behavior? The truth is that we're often not as stuck as we think we are. Again, there's value to the stories we tell ourselves. We can get a healthy sense of identity. We can begin to know ourselves and recognize, I tend to get angry when this happens, or I tend to freak out when that happens. So to be on the lookout for it and to familiarize ourselves with it. But we can also be aware of the times that the stories kind of just contract on us and keep us somewhere that we don't necessarily want to be. We don't have to feel anxious every time we go into this situation. We don't have to continue doing something that's not making us happy. When Elizabeth and I made the decision to move, one of the big factors was we both kind of asked each other, what makes you happiest? And both of our answers were the same. When we're able to spend time together without our cell phones, without being near a computer, without working, just spending time together, adventuring and exploring. And there's a responsibility factor there too, but we were able to do that and achieve that thus far. So I want to offer just a few thoughts on how we can really bring mindfulness to these stories and what to do with them when we notice them arising. My first kind of suggestion is to pause for a moment, maybe once you shut off this video, or even right now, click pause and question what stories you tell yourself. Where are places that you get angry or anxious or sad or scared, or even excited, or fall into attachment and clinging and grasping? That if we start here, like, oh, I tend to get really upset when somebody's condescending to me, that we can start to see that story telling itself over and over again in our lives. Maybe for the past few times we've experienced it, and often all the way back to childhood. And I'm not a therapist, I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole, but I do think that often these stories have been retold and reinforced for years in many of us. So what are the kind of experiences you experience, and see if you can recognize a pattern or the story. When the story does arise, how do we recognize it? How do we know that that's not just a one-time occurrence? And for me, what I do is I really try to just let go of any analyzing or trying to figure out a story, especially in meditation practice. Let's say you do experience some anxiety, whether it's during the day, at work or school or with family, or in a formal sitting practice. When you notice that anxiety arise, see if you can really be with it and familiarize yourself with it, without judgment, without needing it to change, without needing to figure it out. With some kindness and care. What does it feel like in the body? People experience anxiety in different ways. Maybe you feel a pounding in the chest or some tightness. Maybe the shoulders clench up a little bit. Maybe you notice some sweating or clenched fists. There's all these feelings in the body that can go along. Feelings in the stomach or digestion. And there's an experience in the mind, of course, too. That's what an emotion is a feeling in the body, and often a thought process or mental formation that goes along with it. It may be obsessive thinking or repetitive thinking, the thinking in circles that we often do. And just see if you can tune into that whole experience. From moment to moment, what does that anxiety actually feel like? Not what can you learn about it, or what can it tell you about your stories, or how can you pick it apart. Just be with the actual experience. Part of mindfulness is recognizing and remembering. We think of mindfulness so much as being present, but the word sati itself, many scholars point to the fact that it actually means remembering or recognizing. Sati is the Pali word we translate as mindfulness, but there's this piece that's deeper than not just being it's not just being present, it goes deeper than that. So for example, as we sit with this anxiety and in the body, and then it comes up a day or a week or a month later, and we sit with it again, there's a natural part of ourselves that will recognize, oh, this is what I call anxiety, and I'm familiar with it, and I know it, and I'm touching it and really being with it. As we really tune into something and really experience it and are present for it, we're able to recognize it more easily in the future and connect it back to past experiences. And with this, we can begin to build an understanding of the stories and the habit patterns, or habit energies, as Thich Nhat Hanh calls them. So my encouragement to kind of sum that up is to be with the experiences that arise, whether they're pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. when you experience the anxiety or the fear or the joy or the excitement, see if you can really tune into the experience in the mind, in the body, and just be with it. And next time it comes up, just be with it again. And eventually, the piece of wisdom within you will recognize, oh, there's a pattern here. When, I'm around this person, I tend to feel this same thing that I've been labeling as anxiety. The other thing I want to offer is to always be open to extending metta or loving kindness, or even compassion if it's painful. Just by opening up and offering some phrases of gentleness or compassion, we can make room for these experiences. And we've been going with anxiety, so just as anxiety arises, instead of kind of pushing it away or trying to get rid of it, to soften around it, be gentle with it, and allow it to be there, to trust in ourselves and our ability to sit with it fully. And this allows us to get a little closer to it and see it a little bit more clearly. So those are all my thoughts, not all of my thoughts. This would be a 7-hour podcast if I gave you all my thoughts on stories. Those are some thoughts on stories, on just investigating how they serve us, how they don't, and how we can bring mindfulness to them. I encourage you as you go about your day or weeks or months to stay open to the stories you tell yourself and where they serve you. So just a few logistical announcements. The way that we're asking for support on this podcast is not by donations. That's not what we're looking for. We would love instead if you click like on this video, if you leave us a nice comment, if you share the video, if you click the little subscribe button to One Mind Dharma. I want to offer that we have a relatively new, we've been asked a lot about our 30-day meditation challenge that we do once every few months. And we get many emails about it, so we decided to just make it ongoing and public and free. So you can learn about that at omdharma.com/30, not written out, omdharma.com/30. And you can get the meditations by email or here on YouTube, and it's just a 30-day meditation challenge that kind of goes through different practices. You can repeat it as many times as you want. It's free. I just want to shout that out. And the last thing I want to offer is if you have any issues with anything I said, you have any questions about meditation in general that you want me to address, or you have a topic you want us to cover, you can always send me an email at matthew@oneminddharma.com. My hope is that, as with the old Dharma Talk, that we begin getting some questions to really fuel topics and ideas so I can know what you're interested in and what would be most useful to you. There's no dumb question. All of them are welcome, and I look forward to hearing from you. So I thank you for your attention here today. As always, it's been a pleasure, and it's my distinct honor to be able to share my own insights with you. I look forward to hearing from you and to any questions you may have.